So happy to have Cyrus Freidheim with us this evening, who's going to speak on his book, Commit and Deliver on the Front Lines of Management Consulting. Also with us is Robert Dillenschneider of the Dillenschneider Group, and he is going to introduce our speaker. So good evening to you both.
Good evening.
Thanks very much, Linda. To all of us on this line, we are really blessed. We're really fortunate to have an individual of Cyrus Freidheim's caliber talking to us tonight. This is really an extraordinary man. Cyrus Freidheim has served on 17 corporate boards, 17 boards. He served on an equal number of nonprofit boards. Just think about all the people you know and add up all the boards they've sat on. Not 17, I guarantee you. He's an extraordinary figure. He has been chairman of 5 of those boards, and those boards have been very, very successful as companies going forward, because Cyrus really understands governance. Cyrus Freidheim has worked in every continent in the world except Antarctica. He's vowed to get to Antarctica at some point, but we'll see what happens. He's worked in more than 25 countries. He understands business around the world intimately. He understands Western Europe. He understands Asia. He understands Vietnam. He also, I'm sure, has a view, he might not share it with us, but on Ukraine. But this is a man of real caliber, real position, real knowledge. He authored The $1 Trillion Enterprise. It was very, very successful. When he's put that book down, he was asked to publish another one called Commit and Deliver, which is really what we're going to be talking about tonight. But I know, because I know Cyrus a little bit, he's also working on another book that he's hopefully going to have out by Christmas. I won't tell you what the name of that book is because it'll scoop the Ferguson Library, but it's going to be a blockbuster, I guarantee. Cyrus, we're really fortunate to have you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bob, and congratulations for both starting and conducting this lecture series on civility in America, because I think in the beginning you and I talked about it, and there was no doubt that this is just an absolutely crucial issue in our country, even getting more and more serious kind of every year. And by the way, I'm honored to be here. I love to be in the company of people like David Petraeus and Henry Kaufman. Well, everybody agrees that civility is in our society is awful. Incivility fractures the glue of respect that holds our societies together. And that's all different kinds of societies, both nationally and internationally. Political road rage has become common on TV as in political debates and in ordinary discussions. The core mission of our political parties appears to be to embarrass and ridicule the other side. It's hard not to understand why Congress is paralyzed. Actions of Vladimir Putin, as you mentioned, Ukraine, Bob, are clearly uncivilized. Well, I approach the topic from the perspectives, as Bob mentioned, of an international businessman, a person active in community organizations, and now as an author. My thought is to apply Vince Gill's great song, "Let There Be Peace on Earth," to civility, and let it begin with me. In my mind, civility is simply respecting everyone, even your enemies, as Arthur Brooks pleads in his wonderful novel, not novel, book, Love Your Enemies. Civility is a value, a principle, a way of approaching life in any career path. Civility is the language of respect. Like other values, civility or respect must come from within. Like other values, it can be taught. It is blind to race, economic or social status, religion, age, or anything else. It is at the core of what binds us as a nation and even within our own families. Well, let me make an assertion based on my 60-plus year career that success is almost impossible without respect for others, unless, of course, you inherit your business from daddy. Bob asked that I talk about my book, Commit and Deliver, on how to navigate a career. The core message in the book is to, quote, respect everyone, no matter who, no matter when, no matter where, no matter whether they love you or hate you. I focus in the book on how a professional in any field can be successful. And I invite the reader to ride alongside saddle with me as I relive my professional career with 20/20 hindsight. I am not so smart that I knew what to do during those times. So I tell you when I misstepped, and I tell you when I got the right answer. And in retrospect, I look at what should have been my actions. Why did I do this, and for whom was this written? Well, the first book, which was Bob didn't mention because it was just in a family, was called Notes from Grandpa. That was written because my children came to me and said, your kids will never know you. Your grandkids will never really know you. And you should write a book. Well, I said, well, why not? And they said, Dad. And I then quickly did the age calculation, a little arithmetic, and they're right. So I wrote that book. And after that, I converted that book into something that has, in my view, a broader application. And it's really a memoir, it is a mentor in a memoir form. My objective is to pour all of my experience into a guide I would have wanted throughout my life, a mentor. Not a book of slogans, and not, but how to make important career and life decisions. Well, we all know that all of us, and I think this applies to everybody that's on this call, but also probably to your kids as well. We get serious at different times in our life. People mature at different rates. Usually it takes a hit in the head. Mine was a basketball injury that knocked me out of my season, at my junior year season in high school. And I got serious. Well, Commit and Deliver can be that hit on the head for kids today. Deciding what kind of a person you want to become, not just your career, but what kind of a person, is extremely important. And I'll bet that almost none of you on this call have made such a decision discreetly or intentionally, but everyone should. Given the choice, almost every kid, if you asked a kid, almost any kid, the decisions that they would make or what they would tell you would be a whole list of virtues, including civility and respect for others. No 10-year-old kid would tell you he wants to be a criminal or a bad parent or dishonest or nasty or disrespectful or have a lousy reputation. Of course not. But that happens in many cases. Why? Because they haven't really, at an early age, decided what they wanted to be. Well, that's the job of your first mentor, and Commit and Deliver can help. The book is for students interested in business, undergrad and grad school, what a career looks like, what does it take to succeed, through retirement and everything in between. Well, choosing your first job, for example, I go through and with the reader and talk about what the options are, what's important, what really matters. It is clearly an important and first step on your career ladder. Mine was at Ford Motor Company, and I did not, it was not the highest offer I had coming out of business school. And I would strongly recommend that you never look at it in terms of dollars and cents on your jobs, of any jobs that you pass through. Mid-career professionals. Is that all there is? We all hit that point. Is that all there is? How do I accelerate? Should I move or stay, change courses, whatever? I had several, but two were really important. One was going into my first leadership role at Booz Allen. I had to move in order to do it. And I had two options. One was Cleveland and one was Brazil. And I looked at it entirely in life terms and career terms, not in what would it be like there, both for me and for the family. Although I did consider those things, but it passed a fairly low bar to get through that one. But the other was very tough. And I think that the thoughtful or the approach that I took is applicable virtually to anybody facing career choices. The second major choice or business decision I made on my career was really driven by disappointment. I had long thought that I would become the CEO of our company, but sure enough, in the time that when it was sort of my time, I didn't get it and was disappointed. So what I take the reader through is what that feels like and how you deal with it and how far you should go. A couple of the other people who went through the same process and didn't get it left. I didn't. I decided that what I was doing, I loved, and I decided that I would stay. And this is a tough decision to make, but one that I think is useful to walk through yourselves way in advance of when it happens. Then what's it like to be in the top? I had two jobs as a CEO, one at Chiquita and the other at Sun Times. Both were kind of turnaround situations. So the questions are, well, how do you get there? Is it worth the effort? And when you arrive, what do you do? Community services became very important to me, and I take the reader through what it's like, why you should do it or why you should consider it, what are the options, and how do you go about doing it. I had, as Bob indicated, quite a number of community organizations, many of which I chaired, and they were all exceptional experiences. Although there were a few that weren't, and I tell you, I take the reader through how you think about when things are not going quite right. Commercial boards, well, I had, as Bob said, something like 17. The question is, how do you go about, if you're interested, how do you go about identifying them, getting considered, getting elected on a board? And I give you very specific examples of how to do it and what it's like and how to be a successful board member. Now, one of the things that's very interesting here for me was that management consultants are not considered candidates for most boards. And so I had that kind of going against me. But I did have a mentor in the process, and he was the one who broke the ice and got me my first commercial board. And that helped me throughout the rest of my career. One of the questions that I deal with here is how, and by the way, I think anybody who is or is thinking about becoming a management consultant should read this book. I have frankly not seen any book that deals at the level that I have with management consulting as a profession. What it takes to succeed, what are the pluses and minuses, how do you go about it? It's been a wonderful profession for me. It is extraordinarily stimulating. The way I like to put it, what you're asked to do by somebody, usually a CEO in the case of management consultants, you're asked to solve a problem which he knows and understands much better than you do, because you probably don't know anything about it until he calls you. And yet he hasn't been able to solve it. And he's got a lot more experience with both the company and these kind of problems. And he says, you have usually 3 months to give me an answer and get me to act. Now, for some people, it's the most exciting thing you can imagine. It's just so stimulating. It's different every assignment, every company. But for others, it's pure hell. And they, so management consulting is not for everybody, but it is an extraordinary profession that I really enjoyed. One of the things that I thought I'd share is kind of the perspective I took as a management consultant. People have asked me, well, how do you do it? You go out and get the facts and all that. And I said, well, the first thing I do is I put myself in the shoes and the mindset of my client. And then the client, well, I'd say 90% of my work was the CEO of the company, and look at the problem and his company and his situation through his eyes. So I can understand why he's going to the outside. I can understand what his problem is from his perspective. And from that, I can then figure out what facts do I need and how do I need to approach the problem in order to help him. And I think this approach actually works very well in all relationships, including, by the way, getting that crucial second date of the beautiful young lady that you've been eyeing forever. So that's kind of what I call one of my little secrets, which I rarely ever talk about. As a matter of fact, I've never talked publicly about that, but that's exactly how I approached my work there. Let me share a few experiences with you on management consulting. The tides and epic events in history drive change and progress. And this, it also drives civility and human relationships. But I give you a couple of examples of companies that I work for that were driven by kind of events. Well, the oil spikes in 1973 and 79 really scrambled the automotive industry, and Chrysler was about to be its first major casualty. So we got a call from the Secretary of the Treasury, Bill Miller, who knew our CEO, my boss, and said, look, we got a real problem here. The company's coming to the government asking for a bailout, and we are inclined to do it because President Carter does not want 100,000 auto workers on the street in an election year. And I understood that. And he said, but I do have a problem. I do have a time limit, and that's 2 weeks. And we said, well, what do you want? He said, I want you to know if their plan is viable, if they can, in fact, pull this off, if we give them the money. And how much money should we give them? Well, we said 2 weeks, but eventually there was no doubt we were going to do it. So we dove in, got the best people we could find in our firm, and released them from whatever they were doing and sent them off to Detroit. And over the next 2 weeks, or actually 10 days, we talked to virtually everybody at the executive level, all the reports, understood exactly what was going on, and then called Bill Miller and said, we've got a problem. He said, what's that? He said, they don't have a plan. They've got a production plan, a product plan, they've got a sales plan, they've got all kinds of plans, but they don't have a plan that melds together all the various elements with the current situation where their cash flow is hemorrhaging, and their production, or excuse me, their inventories are exploding, and they're heading straight for bankruptcy. They do not have a plan. They do not know how much money it will take to pull them out. They don't even know what to do about pulling them out. So he gave us an answer, which was, I think, stunning. He said, okay, can you do the plan? And we, of course, said, in 2 weeks. And he said, okay, make it 3. Well, off we went to do it. And obviously it could not be in great detail, but we came up with what we thought was the solution. And we met with the executive team and a few outsiders. John Ricardo, who was the CEO at that time, was almost catatonic. He was just in shock, and he couldn't really help. Lee Iacocca exploded. He said, no way in hell. He didn't like the idea that we said, get rid of your third line of business, which is or car line, which was your luxury line. He didn't like the idea of the radical changes in production levels, because what they were doing is they were producing more cars than they were selling. So that meant that the car lots around the plants were packed with unsold vehicles, and they were pushing vehicles out into the dealer's hands, and those they could count as sales. So even the bad news of the reports was not as ugly as the actual situation. So he didn't want to do it. So miraculously, one of the board members, who was the outside lead director, Dick Dilworth, he worked for the Rockefeller family. He said, fine. And then went off and told Bill Miller what happened. And Miller set up a meeting the following week with the board, the top management, ourselves, and a bunch of people from the Treasury Department over in the Treasury building. If you've ever been in the building where they have these big meetings like that, you'd love it. You know, it's a huge room, looks almost like a cathedral. It's absolutely magnificent with statues around, and it's just it's very serious. So the meeting started with John, a good friend who was the CEO of Solomon at that time, and John said, "No way in hell, save your money. It's a catastrophe, and they can't be saved." Well, at that point, I thought, "Oh, that's a great lead-in to mine comments." And so Jim Farley, our CEO, wished me good luck, and I launched into what we had presented to the management team, even knowing that the management team wasn't really behind it. But Bill Miller saw a light, a kink of light. We told him if they do all this, maybe it can be saved, but maybe not. And he said, "Let's see if you guys can do something together and work it out." So I then met with Dick Dilworth and told him there were three conditions. He said, "Let's go to work." I said, "There are three conditions. One, you got to rehire Solomon Brothers, but with Jim Wolfenson as the head guy, because his view is not the same as John Goodfriend's. I knew Jim very well. He was the point man out on the field with us. And secondly, that Iacocca be named CEO immediately. And third, that Iacocca, call me and ask for a meeting that we decide what we're going to do together." Well, Dilworth came back to me in about an hour and said, "All set. We've rehired Solomon, and Jim Wolfenson is fine with it. We have elected, the board has met in emergency session, elected Iacocca as CEO, and Iacocca says, go ahead and start the work." I said, no. Lee Iacocca has to meet with me and ask me to do it. Now that sounds a little bit arrogant for a consultant, but I knew Lee Iacocca on 90% by reputation, but his reputation was so clear. We were at Ford at the same time, although I was probably 10 levels lower, but he had quite a reputation. And one of the things is he really didn't like consultants. He thought that if you had to have a consultant, particularly a management consultant, you didn't know how to do your job. And so his natural mode was, no way am I going to pay any attention to those guys. And I knew the only way that he would pay attention is if we hashed it out together. So after 3 weeks and multiple calls from Dick Dilworth, I finally got a call from his office. He set up an appointment at his home on a Saturday afternoon. Obviously did not want to see a consultant walking in his office at the company. And we had a wonderful meeting, and we talked about his dislike and disdain for consultants. And I made it clear that the only way that it would work would be for us to work closely together. And then my reason for this is if the company saw that we were simply around because the Treasury Department said we had to be there, we'd never get anything done. We'd have no impact. And so it turned out very positively. We had a great period of time for the next couple of years Chrysler did, as I think you all know, make it through. They wound up repaying all of their debt ahead of time, 5 or 10 years ahead of time. And the government made $300 million on the warrants they got on the loans that they guaranteed. Well, the lessons were clear on that one. Number one, facts really matter. And that's what won over most of the actors within the company. And secondly, you got to understand your client. And if you don't understand him and see the world from his or her point of view, you won't succeed. I've got other ones that I can talk about, but I don't want to get into the Q&A session here. So now, Bob and Linda, do you want to move into some Q&A?
Yes, sure. That was a fascinating story. Thank you very much for that and for all your remarks. One thing that you did mention that the book does delve into is mentorship. And so I thought maybe you might want to just chat a little bit about that. Why are mentors important? What value do you see in that?
Right, right. Well,
and tell us who was that first mentor who helped you?
The first one in business was Don Perkins, whom you know well or knew well. Don was absolutely a wonderful man, and he was a spectacular mentor. He was the one who got me my first job, first board seat, commercial board seat, when nobody else would touch a consultant, and that broke the ice, and I wound up with all those other ones. And secondly, he got me involved in the community. Jim Allen started the relationship. When I got back from Europe, Jim said, I want you to meet one person and I will personally introduce him to you. So we had Jim and Don Perkins over for dinner one night, and both of their wives couldn't make it. Well, Jim's wife had passed away and Don's was almost. So it was just the gentleman. And a week later, Don called. By the way, the history of this was that Jim was Don's mentor. And so this was kind of passing the baton to the next generation. And Don said, I've got your first job. We've got to rescue the city of Chicago. And we spent a ton of time over the next several years creating the civic committee and getting them involved in what I thought was a miraculous turnaround of the city of Chicago. And we need it again, by the way. So mentors, Stan Druckenmiller, who is I think most of the people on the call know, is a very successful investor. And I remember him telling me one time, if the question is mentor versus money, take mentor every time. You will be far richer for it. And I believe it. He's right. And I've been blessed with mentors throughout my career. In the book, I do mention a number of their names and the circumstances. And a mentor, what can a mentor do for you? A mentor can give you selfless advice. A mentor can look at things in a very objective way. And if it's the right person, he or she will be able to tell you something that hurts and is not easy to swallow. But if you've done it right and built up the trust between the two of you, it's priceless. Because there's nobody else typically that can tell you what you shouldn't do that you want to do. And that is as important as confirming the course of action you're on. Matter of fact, probably much more important. So mentors are crucial. I think of the book as a mentor. And as I indicated at the outset, what I've done is written it so that the reader can kind of ride side saddle with me using 20/20 hindsight throughout my career and seeing how things are done and what to do. And so it's not a good replacement for a human mentor, but it is at least a place to start for you.
So one thing that, since the title of the series is Civility, and you mentioned that in the beginning, you've been involved in some very tough turnaround situations. What lessons about civility have you taken from those experiences?
Well, probably the number one, and I don't know if it's the most important, but number one is, you when everybody else is losing their head, you kind of keep calm, and calmness and the facts almost always win out. I've been fortunate that most of the tough situations, the level of trust that had been built up in advance with the CEO enabled us to kind of get through even places where we disagreed. And Iacocca was a good example of that. He has a wonderful and well-earned reputation of being salty. His language is colorful, certainly not in the handbook for civility. And he knows how to put on a real rage. And I had to endure, not too many times, but I had to endure a few. And I realized that the way to handle it was let him go, and don't tell him you shouldn't speak like that. I'm going to tell my mother, but rather just to let him go, and then get the conversation back to where we really are and where we need to go. And that actually solution worked every time. Probably the toughest ones were ones where I disagreed, or let's say we disagreed, my client and I. A couple of good examples of this were Alice Chalmers and British Leyland. In both cases, they wanted basically to reduce their costs so they could increase their profits. When I saw it was really not that would have helped, clearly, but the real problem was that they were in either too many businesses or the wrong businesses. In the case of British Leyland, they put in a guy to head it up, Michael Edwards, who was a wonderful man, and but they put him in that job. British Leyland was basically a roll-up of almost all the major British automotive companies, including the last one, which was the Leyland truck business. But they kept them all separate, and they kept running them as independent businesses. But each one of them had competitors that were focused. And so they had a company that was probably as large as British Leyland, but with only one or two product lines. And those were focused, those were competing with the 10 or 12 that British Leyland had. So there was no way they could survive. And the British government was saying, no, you can't break up the company. You can't sell off these businesses, particularly to foreigners. You've got to make this into the stellar example of how wonderful the British are in the automotive industry. This is a national institution. Well, wrong. And it's a good example of why capitalism works so well. Capitalism says, if you can't compete, get out, sell, or close. And what will happen then is the resources that you have, the human resources, will go someplace else, be redeployed in the economy where they can be more successful. The operations that you had will go over then to another company who will be able to either convert them into something profitable or get rid of them. And so that's kind of the tough work that capitalism does, and it really, really works. Same issue was with Alice Chalmers.
That's fascinating, Bob. I don't want to hog all the questions. Do you have anything that you'd like to ask?
Yeah, I'd like to really ask Cyrus, what's next
What's next for what?
for you? I mean, you had
Oh,
a remarkable career, and I've never known you as a man who sits on his hands and waits. So I'm just curious, what is next?
well, I love, there were, at the end of the book, I had 7 things that I think people should pay attention to in a career. And they stand for no matter where you are in your life cycle. And just let me just quickly go over them, because it sort of says what I'm going to do. I believe that anybody who is at a stage in life that either they've left their last job, or they are the kids are out of the nest and they're free. In the case of women who did not, maybe some women who did not have a direct professional career, and if you still have the energy and the or the wherewithal to do something else, you do it. You don't just sit there and let the world go by and watch television and curse at it when things don't go your way. So you got to be kept involved. And I think there are just so many ways that people can do this. In my case, I've had an extraordinary kind of next life. I retired from Booz Allen when I was 66, and with the normal wish list of my bucket list of things that I was going to do, and they included writing, and they included reading all the books that you see in my background here that still are dusty, and it included being involved more deeply in the communities in which I lived, and a number of other things, traveling, maybe even bringing my golf game back to where it was 40 years earlier. Bad wish, never, it won't ever happen. But in any case, what happened to me is that kind of the world took over, and the phone rang a few times, and I've had just a marvelous additional life. The first thing happened was Chiquita. It was a board seat that came up, and the five of us who were selected as the new board for Chiquita, coming out of bankruptcy, decided first, well, we need a chairman, and so they looked around, and I was coming available because I was about to retire from Booz Allen. So why don't you be chairman? I said fine, and that sounded great. I did not ever think of being a CEO, but we met with the CEO a few times and concluded we had to make that change. And so again, the five of us got together, talked about it, and they asked me if I would do it for a couple of years. Well, that was absolutely not in the plan. But what I learned, and this has happened several other times during my retirement, that have a good plan and work hard at it, but just don't close the door on opportunities, because something is going to come along that you're going to absolutely love to do. And that's happened to me several times. Happened to me with Chiquita, happened to me with the Sun Times, happened to me getting involved in political things, happened to me with our club here at Lost Tree. And then eventually it's happened to me with writing. So I'm busy, and God willing, I'll stay busy until he calls me home, and I'm loving every minute of it.
Well, I have to ask you too, as a final question, since you mentioned opportunity, what piece of advice can you give to young people who are just starting out, looking at their future?
Yeah, well, read the book, of course. But I remember one time I was at a lecture with James Mattis, the former head of the Marine Corps and the Defense Secretary under Trump. And this is after he had left government. And someone asked him that question. And I thought the answer was perfect, and I've used it in the book. As a matter of fact, it's the subtitle at the end. And that is that you are your most important project. I think that more than anything else, what a young person must understand is that everybody has challenges. I don't care whether they're economic challenges or wrong family, wrong geography, whatever it is. You're there at age, 15 to 20, and it's up to you to determine where you go in this world. Entirely up to you. You will have challenges. Everybody does. Some of them seem impossible. That's okay. I certainly think that Nelson Mandela had challenges that nobody could imagine being more horrible, of being in prison for 26 years and then finally getting out. I mean, of course, he should be filled with hatred. He should be exhausted. He should be sick. But the man rose to become one of the greatest leaders of our time. So I look at that and I say, well, whatever challenges I have, it's nothing compared to him. And I think that's the case with all young people. And so I would say, did I go away?
Yeah.
Okay, back, good. I would say as a key thing, being taking responsibility for your life is number one. And then there are a lot of things you can do to get yourself going after that. The education you have, the thinking about the jobs that you're going to take, always looking for the long run, having the long view on each decision you make related to your life. Picking the right partner in marriage, I mean, is just unbelievably important. As one person said to me one time, 90% of your happiness or misery will be generated by the person that you marry. And I think it's true. And I was lucky because I wasn't very smart when I got married, but I got the right one. So that's another piece of advice that is great 2020 hindsight. And very few young people will pay any attention to it at all because you'll fall in love, right?
Well, that's wonderful advice. And thank you so much for everything. It was fascinating discussion.
Cyrus, thanks very much. We really enjoyed having you. Linda, thank you very much for setting this up. And we're all fortunate at the Ferguson Library.
Good night, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for inviting me. This was a great pleasure and an honor. And I think what you're doing is terrific. I hope that eventually you will make a dent in our almost sclerotic society on this issue. And it seems that we're just getting worse and worse. I think that this woke issue, which is kind of capturing everybody, is all based on lack of respect. It's this. That's why I thought is a topic that really civility is the language of respect, and without it, I don't know how a society proceeds and progresses. And I think that's at the core of all the issues that are being raised in our society today with the woke culture. It isn't that those people that are pounding the streets are wrong. There are issues that need to be resolved, but I think it's the issue of respect. And I know in my experience I'm mainly with the Chicago school districts and some of the tough neighborhoods, that the number one issue, if you talk to a young kid and a young minority kid from these neighborhoods, what infuriates them more than anything else is being disrespected. And it doesn't cost anything for us to respect everybody. It doesn't cost anything for us to be civil, but the impact is gigantic. And I think that's frankly the only solution to the problems that we face that look insurmountable at this point in time.
Linda, I just want to say again, thank you for putting this together. If anybody on the line chooses to write you or me or anybody else at the head of Ferguson, we'll try to send them a copy of Cyrus's book.
Okay, very good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Good night, everyone.